Put an Ashkenazi Jew and a Mizrahi Jew beside each other, and history seems to offer an easy explanation. One came from Europe. The other remained in the Middle East. So it is tempting to imagine two separate peoples who happened to preserve the same religion. But when researchers compared their genomes, the clean division began to collapse. The DNA did not show one group as simply European and the other as simply Middle Eastern. It revealed shared ancestry, different layers of local mixture, and centuries of isolation. The most surprising evidence came from 33 people buried beneath a medieval German city. Their bones preserved a genetic event that had already transformed Ashkenazi history before its great expansion. Before that discovery makes sense, one misunderstanding has to be removed. Mizrahi is not the name of one ancient biological population. It is a broad modern label for Jewish communities with roots in Iraq, Iran, Kurdistan, Yemen, the Caucasus, and nearby regions. Those communities did not all share the same journey. Some lived near old Mesopotamian Jewish centers. Others developed under Persian, Arab, Kurdish, or Caucasian rule. They spoke different languages and often married within different networks. Genetic studies, therefore, do not find one single Mizrahi profile. They find several related but distinguishable communities. Any claim that Ashkenazi and Mizrahi DNA can be reduced to two neat percentages is simplifying a history that was never neat. Ashkenazi history is also more layered than the familiar map suggests. The name became associated with Jewish communities of Central and Eastern Europe, but their ancestors did not suddenly appear in Poland or Lithuania. Genome-wide studies repeatedly place Ashkenazi Jews between Middle Eastern and European populations. Their DNA carries ancestry related to the Levant and surrounding West Asia, alongside a major European contribution, much of which models connect to Southern Europe, then to the Eastern European homelands, where Ashkenazi communities later grew. The exact proportions change depending on the samples, reference populations, and statistical model. But the broad conclusion remains stable. Ashkenazi ancestry is neither purely European nor purely Middle Eastern. It is the genetic record of movement between both. Mizrahi communities usually preserve a different balance. Iraqi and Iranian Jews, for example, tend to cluster closer to populations of the Middle East and West Asia than Ashkenazi Jews do. Yet they also form their own genetic clusters, rather than simply blending into surrounding populations. This suggests continuity maintained through marriage patterns and shared community life alongside local ancestry. Georgian, Kurdish, Yemenite, Iranian, and Iraqi Jewish histories cannot be treated as interchangeable. Each passed through its own founder events and regional contacts. The difference from Ashkenazi Jews is therefore not that one group possesses authentic Jewish ancestry while the other does not. The difference is that related ancestral threads traveled through different landscapes and collected different genetic layers along the way. But how far back does the shared thread go? Modern genomes can reveal relationships, yet they cannot name every ancient population with certainty. Researchers need ancient DNA for that, and the Eastern Mediterranean is difficult because heat damages genetic material. Even so, genomes from Bronze and Iron Age individuals in the southern Levant have transformed the discussion. They show that the region itself was never genetically frozen. People associated with Canaanite material culture already carried ancestry related, both to earlier local Levantine populations and to groups connected with the Zagros, or Caucasus. Later migrations added layers. There was no single untouched ancient Levantine genome waiting to be inherited unchanged. The source population was already mixed before the major Jewish diasporas formed. That finding destroys one of the most seductive myths in ancestry storytelling, the idea that authenticity can be measured by genetic purity. It cannot. No modern Jewish community is a sealed sample from biblical times, and DNA cannot identify faith, covenant, language, or culture. What it can detect are patterns of shared descent, mixture, separation, and population growth. Across multiple studies, many Jewish diaspora communities show greater genetic affinity to one another and demopulation and to Middle Eastern populations than would be expected if they were merely unrelated converts from their host societies. But those same studies also show local contributions. Shared origin and regional mixture are not competing explanations. Both happened, and the argument becomes misleading when one is used to erase the other. Then came the cemetery in Erfurt, Germany. Archaeologists recovered remains from a medieval Jewish burial ground, and researchers generated genome-wide data from 33 individuals who lived during the 14th century. Those buried there already resembled modern Ashkenazi Jews genetically. More importantly, they carried signs of the severe founder event that still shapes Ashkenazi genomes today. A founder event occurs when a population descends from a relatively small number of ancestors. Rare variants carried by those founders can become unusually common as the community expands. The Erfurt genomes showed that this bottleneck had taken place before the 14th century. Ashkenazi genetic distinctiveness was not created recently in Eastern Europe. Its foundations were already present in medieval Germany. But the cemetery contained another surprise. The medieval community was more genetically varied than modern Ashkenazi populations. Researchers detected differences in Eastern European-related ancestry among the individuals, suggesting that groups with somewhat different histories had come together. Over time, later population growth and mixing within the Ashkenazi community reduced some of that internal contrast. The discovery changed the story from a simple line into a convergence. Medieval Ashkenazi Jews were not one perfectly uniform population marching eastward. They included distinct branches that met, merged, and then expanded dramatically. The genetic similarity visible today is partly the result of that shared bottleneck and later growth, not evidence that every earlier Ashkenazi community had always been identical. This is where the comparison with Mizrahi Jews becomes revealing. Many Mizrahi communities also practiced endogamy, marrying mainly within established communal boundaries. They too experienced founder effects and long periods of relative isolation. But they did not pass through the same European bottleneck, nor did they receive the same Southern and Eastern European ancestry. Their genomes therefore retained different combinations of Levantine, Mesopotamian, Iranian, Arabian, Caucasian, and other regional connections. Ashkenazi and Mizrahi Jews can share deep ancestry while remaining clearly distinguishable in a genetic analysis. That is not a contradiction. Close relatives can carry the same ancestral foundation and still become different after centuries in separate populations. Maternal and paternal lineages deepen the mystery further. Some paternal lineages, found across geographically distant Jewish communities, connect to wider Middle Eastern genetic patterns, supporting elements of shared male ancestry. Ashkenazi maternal history, however, includes powerful founder lineages with important European connections. That does not mean European women created an entirely unrelated population, nor does paternal similarity prove an unchanged biblical bloodline. Uniparental markers follow only one narrow branch of a family tree, one father's father's line, or one mother's mother's line. After 1,000 years, each person has countless genealogical ancestors who leave no direct mitochondrial or Y chromosome signature. The whole genome tells a broader story, and that story points to both continuity and incorporation. So what did the DNA reveal that no one wanted to admit? Not a hidden winner, not proof that one Jewish community is older, purer, or more legitimate than another. It revealed that categories people defend as ancient and absolute were shaped by diaspora history. Ashkenazi identity formed through Middle Eastern ancestry, European mixture, medieval founder events, persecution, migration, and extraordinary population growth. Mizrahi identities formed through older Jewish centers across West Asia, local regional connections, separate founder events, and centuries of communal continuity. The two histories overlap at depth, then diverge, branch again, and sometimes reconnect. Genetics does not flatten those differences. It explains how they became real. The comparison also exposes a problem with the word versus. Ashkenazi versus Mizrahi sounds like a contest, but the genomes describe a family of histories rather than opposing bloodlines. Within each label, individuals vary. Some families moved between Europe, North Africa, the Ottoman world, and the Middle East, long before modern identity categories hardened. Sephardic and Mizrahi histories sometimes overlap culturally and genealogically. Conversion, adoption, migration, marriage, and changing community boundaries also belong to Jewish history. A population cluster is a statistical pattern, not a wall around every person. No DNA result can tell an individual how Jewish they are, where they belong, or which tradition carries greater value. And perhaps that is the real admission. The strongest evidence supports neither total sameness nor total separation. Ashkenazi and Mizrahi Jews are not genetically identical because their ancestors spent centuries in different regions and mixed with different neighbors.